Welcome to the Dead Astrologer Society. This is episode 3, which is about what to expect when you're seeing an astrologer. Now, the inspiration for this episode was from our fabulous producer, Chad McKenzie, who asked during our first episode, why in the world would you want to see an astrologer? What do you actually do? And so, tonight, that's what we're going to talk about. I am your host, Donna Woodwell. I'm an astrologer, hypnotist, magician, chief troublemaker, take your pick. And you can find me at formlessastrology.com here in Austin, Texas. Just like our tagline says, the Dead Astrologer Society is where history meets mystery. So every week we have a special group of guests talking about a topic from history or across cultures somewhere in the world that has something to do with the landscape of astrology. So this is astrology beyond the borders of horoscopes that you might read in magazines. So don't bother to ask what it means for your personal sign. We don't do that here. Our guests are eclectic, and we love to explore the mysteries of astrology. And we're all star lovers, and we're going to share some of that love with you tonight. And so, tonight, we have some fabulous people online. We have Hadley Fitzgerald, who is an astrologer and a psychotherapist from the Los Angeles area. And we have Richard Smoot, who a one-time social worker and now the organizer of the International Society of Astrological Research's Consulting Skills Curriculum. And we have Lesley Francis, who is a psychic and an astrologer from Edmonton, Alberta. Plus, we have a couple other people here. Of course, we have Chad, the wonder producer, and we have Lacey Gibbon Norton. I'm sorry, I had it. I know her. You think I get it right by now. We have Lacey Gibbon Norton, who is with me in the studio, as you can tell. Hi, Lacey.
Hello.
She is with the Traveling Psychic Supper Club, and she is how we do radio. So, without further ado, I want to open the discussion with a really simple question, and that is, we are all astrologers here, and why in the world would someone want to come and talk to us? So, Hadley, I turn over the floor to you.
Okay. Oh, let me count the ways. Because I've been thinking about this question, Donna, and because I'm a therapist, clients can come to me for a number of reasons in addition to a classic astrological consultation. But that said, I think it depends on, in certain ways, on the client's stage of life. When I was in my early 20s, I felt like I had all the answers, and then in my late 20s, they changed all the questions, And so the questions keep changing as life goes on, and yet there are these core concerns that prevail for each individual. So I think more in the first half of life, and the first half of life is relative in this very rapidly moving world that we're in right now. There's often more concern with social and career matters, maybe, biological matters, who will I be with, where do I locate myself in the world, and that includes, my ego self in the world. And so the questions, I think, to the astrologer, or the concerns that are brought to us there, and this is not across the board, but just maybe I was trying to think of it generally, have more to do with, how will something turn out? What should I do? As in, tell me what to do. But mostly, I think even younger people want to know why something has happened or is happening. They want to burrow beneath the event or the situation and figure out how to address it and how to think about it and understand it, and then they want to figure out what they can do about it. Then in the second half of life, I think the more spiritual and psychological concerns bubble up if they haven't already. And so the questions are, what's the larger context of my life? And, beyond the specific I that has been focused in the world somewhere, the questions, there's more reflections. So the issues that are presented in the consultation might move more into that area. Maybe the client wants to change directions or shift priorities, or they feel their values are changing, or they find themselves living someone else's life all these years, not their own life, and so now what do they do? So I think there's a conscious from another perspective, let's say humans consult us. Human beings consult those of us in this field because on a conscious level, they want to be reassured. They want to hear about themselves. They want to hear whatever they need to know so they can trust the unknown. And in this century where life moves at such a pace and whatever infrastructure we used to believe we could count on is crumbling or has crumbled, clients are reaching out to those of us who do this work in order perhaps to find a different level of security. And on the unconscious level, I think people want to get connected with their souls. They want to be in touch with what is soulful in themselves, and they may not know exactly why they're doing this, but they're hoping we can plug them into something they can't quite articulate. They couldn't quite articulate. You could call it, a yearning for the non-material exploration of their lives.
Leslie and Richard, is that your experience, or do you have certain specialties?
Who wants to go first? No.
Go ahead, Leslie.
I think that Hadley's description was extremely succinct, and in my practice, I find that what people are seeking is both the spiritual, the emotional, and the practical, all rolled into one, which leaves astrologers with quite a broad spectrum of things to do in a session, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, Richard.
I certainly agree, Hadley. That was a marvelous, marvelous introduction. My clients and certainly other astrologers I've worked with, that's clearly the insight part. I appreciate you adding in the younger crowd versus, let's say, an older crowd of people who seek. There's probably as many reasons for people contacting us as there are people. My clients tend to be, let's answer my phone there. My clients tend to be those that are more in their past 50 years old, and they're moving into cycles of spiritual understanding that they want to get a better grasp of. And seeing it from another angle, they seem far more comfortable in talking about the wide range of things, especially when they're talking about, I get this feeling that something's going on. That's always a tip-off for me, that something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, it's a verification of some particular cycle and looking for some type of guidance on how they can lead themselves through that and what it all means and how it connects them to the outside world or the situation that's going on. How can it be meaningful to them, and then they can progress on themselves, with themselves.
It's like we're being called.
Which leads perfectly to saying that really doing this kind of work, it is in essence a calling. Mm-hmm. Not in essence, it is a calling, and a powerful one at that. I don't think you become an astrologer and want to work with people so intensely and so personally unless it is a calling. So part of coming to see one of us is really an opportunity for the individual to really seek themselves and hopefully find themselves somewhere along the road.
Agreed, yes.
Yeah, I think too, Donna, this is Hadley, that astrology, this gift that we've been given to work in this field, it can help in just every conceivable direction of life, wherever you go. It provides a frame for, weighing pros and cons, pitfalls and opportunities. It can provide someone with self-evaluation, one's capabilities during the inevitable crises in life, questions like, who am I? What am I doing here? what are my talents? What is my potential? What are my chances of coping with whatever's going on? And then I look at it therapeutically and I say, okay, what gets in the way? We ask, and astrologers try to answer these questions. What gets in the way of my decision making and my relationships and the expression of my gifts in the world? And how, what kind of help can we offer for that from the chart? Because the chart has all of that information in symbolic form. And
right, and that's why we're here tonight with, obviously, for astrologers of the modern age. But this kind of work has been done in one form or another for 3,000 to 4,000 years. For the ancient Greeks, astrology was a tool to find eudaimonia. And eudaimonia is a fancy word that modern people have translated as happiness, as in the pursuit of happiness from the Declaration of Independence. But the original meaning of it was to find that divine spark within you. And that astrology was a tool to help you understand what that divine spark is and help you manifest that in your life. And that's how you find happiness. Joseph Campbell called it following your bliss. And that we are the inheritors of a very long tradition of helping people to follow their bliss.
Well, I'd like to pipe in, if I may. This is Lacey. I'm basically an astrological amateur. I've dabbled in it just a bit. When I was young, I wasn't allowed, just religiously speaking, to even read my horoscope in the newspaper. And I was always attracted to it, but just couldn't do it. But I agree that, when I was younger, I could have used that practical side and probably every side to guide me in that young part of life. And now, there's the larger picture, which I also agree with. I can use the practical, the spiritual, and the total guidance of it, which I'm now seeking through Donna, my new friend. And, and for me, being intuitive, this is just going to provide, I think, some affirmations to what I'm already feeling is the road in life and the new things coming up for me. So I'm looking forward to Donna doing my birth chart here soon.
Oh, dear. Well, at least she's not asking me to do it on the air.
That may be way too scary.
Well, Lacey,
I'm not sure I can run Skype and an astrological software program and a chat room and Facebook all at the same time without my computer going.
Oh, sure you can.
Yeah, you can.
Well, Lacey,
your chart. You can do it.
Go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry.
I said, I've seen your chart, Donna. You can do it.
No, Lacey, I think you have a very good point. I remember when I first came, this is Hadley, when I first came into this world of astrology and really started looking at what it could do, and I felt very called to it. And I also, I was cast aside by my family because astrology was the work of the devil. So,
right.
I know the drill. And I've looked back and thought, if my family, if my teachers, if certain people in my life had my chart and could have understood me and helped me understand myself better, possibly some of the trials and travails would have been shortened, although that's not in my chart that's going to happen. So I had to learn all this stuff, from scratch. But yeah, it's a higher the chart really is a higher purpose compass. The astrology is a higher purpose compass. The metaphor I've been using lately is it's your cosmic genome. It's the description of your soul's DNA, and by DNA here I mean divine natal agenda. You have celestial genetics, and that it's so valuable, and I've been at it now for more than 4 decades, and so I can speak to the reality of every single chart I ever do. I never cease to be amazed that this is possible to do. The gift of it's never boring. It's never routine. It's never, here's another chart. It's, wow, this is just a remarkable thing to be able to do and to offer people,
And that's the exact same thing I tell my clients. people here, if they're allowed to read their horoscopes in magazines, are used to the idea that they're a Virgo or a Sagittarius or a Pisces, that they're one of 12. And I think thinking people realize that life is not divisible into 12 categories, and neither are people. At least that oversimplification prevents a lot of people from really embracing astrology further, because they don't realize they can go further in astrology. The horoscopes in magazines, really good ones, are great, but they're our front door. And
absolutely.
When we're talking about astrology, what we're talking about is taking the exact date, place, and time that a person is born and going out and creating a snapshot of the entire sky at that particular moment, so that we know not just where the sun is in the sky, which is what people call their astrological sign, but we also know where their moon is, and we know what's rising on the horizon, and we know where all the other planets are. And by the time you factor in what signs they're in, where they are vis-a-vis the horizon line, what the relationship they have to each other, there are so many possible combinations that it is impossible for any two people in the history of the planet to have the same chart. So when I say you're a snowflake, people's eyes just light up and go, wow, do you mean that I am the way I am because the universe is expressing itself through me and my life? And I say, yep, this is the one shot the universe has at you, so you better make the best of it.
No pressure.
I think it is that uniqueness that in some ways draws people to see an astrologer. Hadley, I like the way you phrase it. I use one where whether a time is circular or linear, it doesn't really make a difference. It seems to be on a wave of some type. Time is something that maybe may be humankind oriented or humankind made, but the time for one moment will stand still. That particle is representative of you and the connection with the universe of the picture, as you say, Donna, of that point in time, which makes it very unique to that person. Now, our clients that come to us, and the amazement that I get after the 4 decades I've been working at it, is every chart is such a blessing to look at, that this is a live spirit behind it. And for myself, that's what draws my passion to study and do what I can to not just answer the person's questions, but make sure that they understand what they're asking and how they're asking it, but then how they, it's not something that's thrown at them that they have to bow and listen to, and it's not from a top down, but it's something that they work with. This is their choice. It's their fate they're actually working with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, well, James Hillman wrote a wonderful book years ago called The Soul's Code. And that idea that there's this code, there's this acorn in there that how do we call it forth, help the client call it forth and honor it. I've thought another image I've used at times is that I don't see myself, or if I ever did see myself this way, I certainly don't anymore for a very long time. I'm not here to give my clients answers per se. I mean, yes, I answer questions and we talk about cycles and we talk about, whatever they bring to the table. But the underpinning pieces, I want to help them see their lives and see themselves with at least slightly different eyes. So if we use the image of a kaleidoscope, where in a kaleidoscope all the pieces of colored glass, pebbles, beads, whatever, that are ever going to be inside it, that in that cylinder, are already there. But when you turn it ever so slightly, you get a different picture of them. So they realign themselves, yet the basic material is present. And the word kaleidoscope is an interesting combination of 3 ancient Greek words that come together to mean the observer of beautiful forms. So I like to help with the turning of the kaleidoscope so clients can find the beautiful form that's already there. And it's often a very complex task, and I certainly experienced that as a therapist too. That it's, and we're right now in a very, very complex time in history where there's an awful lot of stuff going on in the collective soup. out there that is impinging on our clients going along their own paths and doing their own work. It's a very different ballgame than it's been in the past. So there are other charges here, you know.
I say the same thing to my clients, that right now we are in such a profound place of accelerated change. It's all hands on deck. The universe needs every single one of us to step up to the plate and express that full divine spark that we're encoded with, because frankly, we're needed. We're all needed to do our part. And if astrology can help bring people to that awareness as a shortcut, I say, yay, astrology.
Yeah, and you know, the point, I mean, there's all sorts of, you know, one of the things I've been battling, as I imagine the rest of you have in various ways too over all these years, is I do have these moments where, because I recognize the value of astrology so thoroughly in the bones of my body, that I do sometimes wish we had a different word for it, because people, it's been so, I don't know, shredded or desiccated or whatever term you want to use, in terms of what it actually is, that people think they know what it is. As you said, Donna, you know, well, I'm a Virgo, or I'm a Sagittarius, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, and that's it. I'm things. And that it's so, that rubric just limits everyone. And if we could only just have people understand and again, you use the word profound, the profundity of what this can provide. And, I mean, I used to, as a therapist, and I still do. I mean, people come for straight therapy. They don't want to know about astrology. That's fine. I still get their birth dates and do my thing, you know, in the file there. But, you know, the two along. You come to me for astrology, you come to me for psychotherapy. If the client brought up astrology, I would then, of course, offer it in the therapeutic session. But now, I would say in the past 10 years, more and more therapy clients want to address their spiritual lives. You know, the inner life of aspiration and values and moral choice and all of those things that come along. Because, you know, on the other hand, too, science has disenchanted the world in so many ways for a long time. And it's done a lot to separate us from the heart. And so astrology reminds us there's a humane universe. There's a place here where we belong, and we've been called here. And as you said, we're a one-of-a-kind version, never to be replicated ever again. Ever, ever, ever. No one will ever inhabit this body again. No one will ever have this chart again. And so how do we best honor what it tells us about ourselves?
Yeah, it's an amazingly deep and sacred way, I think, of inhabiting life.
Yes.
To feel like everything is connected to everything else, and that the time you were born matters. It matters a great deal, and it starts out a process of an amazing journey that you're on and have been on since the moment you took your first breath.
Yeah.
Or before.
Wow, yes.
That too.
It's time to learn things.
Yes. So, why don't we get into some of these additional topics when we come back from the break? We'll talk a little bit about what it's like to see an astrologer, what you can expect from your sessions, a little bit behind the scenes of what astrologers do to prepare for a session and what happens during a session. So if you will, please bear with us. We will be back in about 5 minutes. We have some great music for you. Listen to the Paramania things and stay tuned. Well, welcome back to episode 3 of the Dead Astrologer Society, where we're talking tonight about what it is to have an astrological conversation. As you remember, I am here with Hadley Fitzgerald from Los Angeles, Richard Smoot from Ohio, Lesley Francis from Edmonton, Alberta, and Lacey Gibbon Morton, who is sitting right next to me in my home studio. So, we're in a conversation now, which is what to expect when you actually see an astrologer. We're going to talk about if we have offices, what to expect during a session, how astrologers prepare, and things like that. So we thought maybe turning over the conversation to you guys and talking about how you see clients. Want to flip a coin? Do rock, paper, scissors? Who wants to start? I'll pick one. I do that.
You can do that.
All right, Lesley, you're on. Where do you see clients?
My preparation begins before the client actually arrives, right when I begin talking to them, because I really want to know what it is they wish to focus on, because the session is about them, and so I want to know where they want to go. Now that, because it first of all, it makes them feel included, because after all, it is a process that involves them. It's not about me. I am merely the interpreter of the map that I see in front of me. And so of course it begins with a phone call. Then I move on to doing the chart and spending the time looking at the various ways I like to look at a chart. And of course we know that there are over 50 specific elements in a chart that we can look at to begin with, never mind extras. So I then will do the preparation work, and then the client arrives and I spend 90 minutes with them, because I want to look not just at what the birth map says about who they are and what their potential is and where their challenges are, but I want to look at what's happening in real time. In other words, where are they in the unfolding of that process? And during the session, of course, always questions. I love questions. I want the person to be involved. It's supposed to be a dialogue, not a monologue. And that, for the time being, is as much as I have to say. No. Hello?
Did you call on me, Donna? This is Hadley.
Go for it.
Okay, I work, pretty much the way Lesley does. If it's a phone call or an email, however people contact me, I sit with a chart for a while before I see somebody. And, now we have, computer programs that print out charts for us. We don't have to do them by hand or in our brains anymore, which is a great gift. And I do look, I've found myself doing this over the years now. When I take the printed chart out of the computer and look at the wheel, I look at where do my eyes go first. And that often clues me into something. But I do the same thing Lesley does when I'm asking, when people are booking an appointment, why are you coming? What is it, you're looking for? Because I want the material to apply to the real life. I don't want it to be some theoretical, abstract, thing out there. I never use jargon. I know some astrologers do, and they're really comfortable with it. I work hard not to talk much at all about, unless someone's very familiar with astrology and they want me to use astrological language, I talk about my interpretation of the symbols, so that they're not going home with, some Mars made me do it or Saturn stopped me from doing it, idea about things, because, we're dealing with an element of mystery here, and we can't impose certainty on the mystery. So, so then when either I do the session on the phone or on Skype or in my home office, I, like Lesley, it's a dialogue. I'm not here to deliver a lecture, even though I try to give in the 90-minute session as much, information that I've put together from the chart. But I always check in, always, and I do this more than, a few times in the session. Is this making sense? Does this sound like you? Can you use this? Because I don't ever need to be right. I want to be helpful. And so these symbols are so rich and so vast and so, we can interpret them on so many different levels, the mundane, the spiritual, the psychological, the immediate, the long-term, all of those things. I don't want the client sitting there trying to make something fit that doesn't fit. One example of that, many years ago, when I was working with a man back east, and as I was talking along about the family dynamics, which I do a fair amount in my natal work with people, I saw this questioning look on his face, and I said, okay, something's not making sense right now. And he said, well, everything you've said so far has been spot on, but right now the way you're describing my father, that's not the father I had. And I said, oh, wow. And because the aspects were so powerful around the father and what he had imprinted there. And I said, oh, okay, so was there a father figure? Was there an older brother, an uncle, somebody like that? And he said, no. Then what we finally hit on, because I didn't want to go further with that misunderstanding in the room, and what we figured out is my client was sent off to boarding school when he was 5. And the cruel and difficult father figure I was looking at in the chart was the schoolmaster who beat him repeatedly.
Oh, wow.
And he was in that boarding school from the age of 5 until he was 18. And he hardly ever saw his father. So clearing up those things. And once he understood that, then he understood his alcohol problem. He understood a whole number of things that then came into the session. But, again, it's Theodore Roszak had a wonderful way of phrasing this. He said, ultimately, no system, no matter what it is that we're looking at, whether it's psychological, spiritual, astrological, tarot, I Ching, any of that, he said, no system is any better than the judgment and the honesty of the people who use it, and wisdom and decency and common sense are qualities of people, not systems. So, how we apply this art is so central. How any astrologer applies this art is so central to the client's experience.
Hadley, I have something to pipe in on that. This is Lacey.
Hi.
I do some psychic work, and I think this is a big question people have when they come to see somebody for multiple types of readings. Do I reveal anything, or do I just sit there stone-faced, not giving them anything that they might use to read me other than what they're getting divinely? And I think that giving somebody like an astrologist or a psychic a little confirmation like you had in that man's face. You knew something was hitting him and not quite right. He wasn't, and it wasn't driving. And so you could pick into that, delve into that and figure that out for him, help him hone in on what was going to help him with that piece of information. So I think it's important for people to know that it is okay to reveal what they think needs to be revealed. You don't have to sit there stone-faced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had the experience many years ago, when I was younger too, Lacey, of sitting with psychics and not wanting to reveal. I wanted to see what was coming. I think astrology, I don't think of myself, while I certainly have psychic experiences, I don't think of myself as psychic. I am reading a map of the soul and of the psyche. And so I want this map to be useful to this human being who is going on about his or her life. And as challenges and choices and aspirations and turns and sometimes very severe crises, that he is up against, and I want to be of service. I want this to be helpful. And so I do need information because I could, there are many, many people born on the same day at the same time in the same hospital, perhaps, all in different bodies and then entering different families. So how do those symbols apply to this life? There are different kinds of Virgos and Geminis and Sagittarians, and there's just the dynamics the possibilities are so limitless.
Right.
And so it's again, as I said, it's a dialogue. It's a cooperative endeavor. How do we help the person sitting there get the absolute most from this session? And I did a session recently for a woman overseas, and she wanted an update because she'd had a number of natal charts done, and I said, okay. And so I said, as we were going along in the update, I said, the reference point here in your natal chart, as you probably know, is blah, 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 blah. Well, she had never been told something that I observed about her natal chart. So there are things, to fill in and to check in, because what she was facing at this particular juncture in her life, everything we're facing has everything to do with our natal chart, we're doing an update. We're looking at cycles and transits and progressions and all of these things that are coming along, but it's still, there's a basic chart. And so how do we make sure there's a really good rounded understanding of and applicability of the content there? So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have a kind of a basic question also. How often throughout life would one seek a reading of their chart? Is it once? Is it periodically? Is it just how they feel? What's the answer to that? Anybody?
Well, this is Leslie. I would say that often I essentially leave it up to the client. If a person is going through some fairly challenging times, they may need to come back and just essentially have you go over what's occurring in their chart for them again, so that because and I'm sure Hadley and Richard will agree that when a person's going through a crisis of some kind, they may require, more than one session in a year, and then they might not come back again for a while. It's hard to put limits on these things. I kind of, allow the client to decide what it is they think they need, as opposed to me imposing a firm rule. You can only do this and you can only do it this many times, or that's my approach.
I work exactly the same way, Leslie. I have many now over all these years, many clients who come in for a yearly lube and an oil change, they check in and they talk about it's valuable to just orient the year ahead and that sort of thing. But also because I work as a therapist, people come back and they want to really they come back and they want to look at the therapeutic and the deeper psychological issues and be in process with me as a therapist, not strictly speaking as an astrologer, but with the astrological understanding that something is transpiring here. And
my clients refer to it as a tune-up. When should I come back for a tune-up?
Yeah.
And so it's again, it's when you have that feeling. It varies for every single client. Sometimes I find when they're going through a particularly tough cycle, let's say they're at the beginning of a Saturn cycle, I may even check in with them, ask them to check in with me about, halfway through that 8-month cycle or at the end of it, or if it's a longer Uranus cycle, because things will evolve and they will have their own illuminations periodically through that cycle. And so I'm there it can be there as a guide as they go through it.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing out there, Richard, is that as the cycle continues, especially the longer and more intense ones, there's a different level of understanding that enters the life. Yeah. And so then, get the compass out and help me get oriented to this part of the cycle,
I think this image of the acorn and the map, which keep coming up, are ones that a lot of astrologers use. For the acorn, that in a way, an astrology chart is like a seed. It's an acorn that is going to grow into a tree over the course of your life, the tree that is you. And you can look at it on the acorn level to see the seed and its basic tendencies, what kind of a seed it is, what its strengths, its weaknesses are. You can look at the seed from the perspective of the cycle. Is it a little seedling? Is it a sapling? Is it a great tree with spreading branches? What does that look like? You can look at the seed from the perspective of the weather around it. Is it raining? Is it in a drought?
Yes.
What are other trees around it causing? Is it by itself? Is it surrounded by a bunch of trees crowding it? All of these kinds of things affect the growth of that tree. And finally, unlike a seed, which is sort of at the mercy of the elements, you are a human being with legs, and you can go water your freaking self. And so...
yes.
It gives you you the opportunity to know when you may have time. There's drought and you need to spend more time taking care to water yourself. And that gets back to the ancient Greek concept of how the Stoics used astrology. It was to help you be the best gardener of your own soul as you could possibly be.
Perfectly put.
And that's what astrologers are doing when you come to them. You're coming to them. They have a blueprint of this entire process and how it's unfolding for you. In essence, you're asking to interpret the map for you. And so they can look at it from the perspective of how it describes the seed, or how it describes the weather at the time, or where you are in that seed's life cycle. And why the best readings, as Richard said, sometimes the best readings are when the client talks and the astrologer says nothing, because you are actually giving them the descriptive language to explore their own experience, the client's experience. But the options, because we work in that dance of fate and free will. I think people come to astrologers and on the one hand they're afraid it's all fated ahead of time because it's astrology, or where's my free will? I think we all realize intuitively that we exist in the middle of those two things. I mean, I am a 40-something-year-old who lives in Austin, Texas with an 8-year-old child. That limits my options for what I'm going to do. I'm not going to go enroll in the Navy and be on a submarine out in the Pacific Ocean. Just not going to happen. Yeah. I'm not going to center for the Celtics either. And people don't think of that as fate, but it is. And it's limits on my free will. But on the flip side, I have a lot of power to make choices within the place that I am. And that's what astrology helps you to do. It recognizes that some of the things in our life, it's just time. For everything, there is a season and a time. And that's what astrology shows. But because we have that knowledge, it gives us the opportunity to realize that, okay, it's time. What are my choices? And we can see a wider range of choices for ourselves, and we can make the best ones that make sense for us. And that's... Actually, I think that comes to a next question. I'm going to lay this open to all of you. How do you choose an astrologer who's good for you? What advice would you give someone if they asked that question?
Well, I was going to say, I think the most important thing is, rather than zeroing in on a particular astrologer, because you can go on the internet, and because many astrologers have obviously their own web pages, I think it would be best to contact them, come up with a list and contact them and ask them what their approach is. Because if the astrologer's approach, like my approach is very focused on assisting people in the process of their unfolding life. I'm not going to be doing predictive work, because I'm much more interested in helping them grow their tree. So if someone is looking for someone who's looking for prediction work, I might not be the person that you're looking for. And sometimes the only way you find out whether someone is a good fit for you is actually to talk to them.
Boy, I'll just second that. 6 ways to Sunday, Leslie. I totally agree, because I say, I will talk about the current and upcoming cycles of your life. And so I can tell you the kind of the timing of something. I can't tell you how the challenges will arise, how the changes will arise, how the opportunities will arise. I can't tell you how to deal with them. So if you want to know, should you start a business and take your life savings and do that right now? I don't know. But let's talk about what is in the way of that, or what your own deep fears about that. How did this come about? All of those things. I remember many, many years ago, I had a guy who, I told him just exactly what I said. I said, I do not tell you yes, no, what, when, all that stuff. I can give you the cycles. We can look at those and explore that, blah, blah, blah. I said, but whether you should or should not do something, I don't know your destiny. I can't know that. That information is not given to me. So how do we collaborate to help you make a good decision? So he said, okay. So he came in to see me. And he's fidgeting after about 15 minutes as I'm exploring what these cycles look like. And I said, as I gave in the previous example, I said, okay, I think I'm not addressing something that's of great concern to you here. And because he was so restless and agitated. And he said, yes, he said, I want to know whether I should make this investment or not. And I said, well, and I gave the rap about how I had talked to him on the phone. And he said, and he looked so frustrated. I said, all right, tell me about the investment. And then he said, well, I'm going to take $1 million and I'm going in with 2 other partners and I like one of them, but I don't trust the other one. But if this goes well, we can make a lot of money. And I just looked at him. I said, why would you go into business with one of 2 other people that you don't trust? How can that turn out well? Well, there could be a lot of money. And I said, you know what? I really can't help you and you don't have to pay me for the session. And I wish you well. So it's that kind of thing. That
yes, it is. At the same time, the clients, I sit and listen. Obviously, we all do. We sit and listen to what they really want. There might be something that's really burning on their mind. But all of us have pointed to the fact that there are structures within their current life cycle that may precipitate a certain kind of action or reaction to what's going on in their life. There's also, obviously, branches of astrology that could assist with some kind of investment. And I'm involving myself in geocosmic signatures in the investment market now and taking a lot of courses. So there's a whole variety of ways that we can approach this and advising our clients that we may not be the right one for this particular kind of question or so forth, and to make a proper referral. I think is always good.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And unfortunately, another hour has flown by faster than I could have ever imagined. So to wrap this up, I would say Chad is asking a question here that says, what questions do you ask to know if an astrologer is legitimate? I would say use your common sense just like you would use to choose a doctor or a lawyer or anyone else. While there aren't standardized professional certifications, there are organizations that do have certification programs. There are also schools with classes. Many astrologers are self-taught, so you can check out their website and see if they look like they're providing content that has some depth to it. Also, any other professional background that the astrologer has. For example, Hadley is a psychotherapist in addition to being an astrologer. Or Richard was just talking about there are financial advisors who have backgrounds in astrology. So if your questions have to do with those kinds of areas, try to find an astrologer who has one of those things. And then finally, as you both said, pick up the phone and call and ask.
Yeah, you get to interview the astrologer.
You do get to interview the astrologer, and if they try to charge you for it, run away.
Yeah.
And that gets back to your common sense. You are the gardener of your own soul, no one else. And if someone is trying to take that away from you or is trying to bait and switch and say you need extra money to do such and such, that's illegitimate when it comes to astrology. Those are people who are scam artists, and you have to keep on the lookout that you don't fall into those traps. There's a big difference between professional astrologers like the people on this phone call and the other kind. So yes. I hope that answers your question. We have 1 minute left, so I got to go really fast to say thank you very much to all of our guests tonight. I hope you had a good time. I certainly had a good time, as always. And why don't we take 1 minute to say how you'll find you. So, Hadley, how can we find you?
I am at www.hadleyfitzgerald.com. My phone number is 818-783-3891, and I can be reached on email at fitzhere2, FITZHERE, and the numeral 2 at AOL.com.
Okay, cool. Leslie, go faster.
www.lesliefrancis.com, or you can email me at lesley_Francis, FRANCIS @hotmail.com.
Okay, Richard.
Richard at richardjsmoot.com, 734-389-5014.
Awesome. You guys are fabulous. I hope you can follow up with us. Of course, Dead Astrologer Society is on Facebook at Dead Astrologer Society or Twitter at just plain old Dead Astrologers. My name is Donna Woodwell from Four Moons Astrology. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter. And I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same channel. We will be talking about how the outer planets changed astrology. So come on back then.